On October 6th of this year, I had a coffee date with someone I was going to turn into a new friend. I invited out to meet me for a cup of coffee our new Shlicha, our Israel emissary, Lior. We were going to have a cup of coffee and talk about the world and talk about her engagement in our Jewish community here in Detroit. I also that night invited her to speak tonight because my name was on the schedule to give the sermon. She agreed, and then October 7th happened. And the world changed not only for us, but for Jews around the world and certainly for Israelis. In her case, the world really changed, and she'll talk about that as she shares her story tonight. My original intent was simply to introduce you to our new Shlicha. Tonight, it's really more than that. It's to support her, to support the people of Israel, and to connect the dots between what's happening across the globe to what's happening right here at Temple Israel. So I want to introduce you to Lior Zisser-Yogev, who grew up in Givat Elah as part of our partnership region in Israel. She served in the IDF as a combat soldier and as a teacher. Earlier than that, though, she came here to Michigan as a camper, part of our Israel camper program, and years later, after serving in Peoria, Illinois, and in Australia as a shlicha, she returns to her shlichut, to her work as a representative of the state of Israel here in Michigan for the next couple of years. It is with great friendship that we invite Lior to come forward to share her story, to welcome her to our community.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Excuse my voice, I'm a bit hoarse. So if it breaks in the middle, it's fine, right? Honored to be here, really, truly. I'm standing in front of what I heard, and I'm not sure if it's really the case, but the biggest Reform congregation in North America. So whether it's true or not, I never let the facts ruin a good story. 21 years ago, I had the privilege to participate in a once-in-a-lifetime adventure, spending the summer here in Tamarack Camp in Detroit. You see, in 2002, Israel was in the midst of yet another round of terror and violence during the Second Intifada. The teen mission that was planned for that year was canceled, and it didn't feel safe to send youngsters to Israel during such times, so it was decided to send a group of Israeli teens to Tamarack instead, and I was amongst this first group of kids that later became the Israeli camper program that has been going strong for the past 2 decades. For me, it was a life-changing experience. It was the first time I encountered the Jewish community outside of Israel, and really the first time I encountered progressive Judaism. As a secular Jew living in Israel, it was really my first encounter with the tradition and the Jewish values. So it was the first time I learned to sing Birkat Hamazon or do Havdalah on Shabbat. It was the first time I learned the phrase Tikkun Olam and its meaning. And it was the first time I saw a rabbi wearing jeans and playing a guitar and a rabbi who's a woman. And I loved it. Also, it was the first time I ever saw fireflies, and that is incredible. So that summer really changed my life. It was the first step in my journey of shlichut, being an emissary for Israel, educating about Israel, and connecting the Jewish people, my people, who live outside the land of Israel. Unlike normal Israelis that travel to South Asia, South America, New Zealand after the army, I chose to go on shlichut to a much more exotic destination, as you heard, Peoria, Illinois. I spent 2 very meaningful years working there for the Jewish Federation, not as big as the Jewish Federation of Detroit, but just as active. And I learned so much about myself, about my Jewish identity, and my connection to Am Yisrael. I went on shlichut as an Israeli, but I returned to Israel as a Jew. And I carried that message of peoplehood back to my homeland. So going back to Israel, I was looking for a way to continue my shlichut. And as late Israeli President Shimon Peres said, a good policy is the best advocacy. So I chose to promote better policies in Israel. I studied political science and education, thinking I will naturally be appointed to be the Minister of Education right after that, which didn't happen until today, maybe in the future. But I went on to work for the Israeli government, doing my best to make Israel a better place to live in. But the past couple of years working for... Toda rabba. Yeah, necessary. But the past couple of years working for the government became quite challenging. Round after round of elections, years without a state budget, and constant limitation of the government ministries brought the public service in Israel to a halt. And I'm not one to stand still for too long. So I decided to take a break from public service to return to the role that I loved so much as a shlicha. Now, that role is not exactly defined. It's very flexible and fluid. It balances between the needs of the Jewish community and the interests and strength of the shlicha to try and create the connection between the Jewish community and Israel. So that is what I came here to do. 4 months ago, I started by meeting with people throughout the community and get to know the different organizations and congregations. And that is how I found myself on October 6th, having coffee with Rabbi Bennett and deciding that I'll come here tonight to give a sermon. Again, I'm not a rabbi, so it's less of a Dvar Torah, it's more of a Dvar Israel. And we didn't know that the next morning we will wake up to a nightmare, a completely different reality from everything we planned. On October 7th, instead of celebrating the rejoicing the holiday of Simchat Torah, an entire country found itself grieving and hurting the loss of so many. And on October 9th, to my horror, I discovered that among the many who fell, there was one that was mine. My little brother, Eli, who was an officer in an elite unit in the IDF and fell in a battle against Hamas terrorists in Kfar Aza. I'll take a sip of water. Excuse me. Ever since receiving the devastating news of my brother's death, I've been dealing with a brand new concept for me, the concept of shchol, bereavement. But this concept is not new at all. In fact, we encounter this sad and heavy word in this week's Parashat HaShavua, Parashat Miketz. When we read the story of the sad reunion between Joseph and his brothers in Egypt, he recognizes them, but they don't know who he is, and he sends them back to bring their youngest brother with them to see him, while leaving Shimon, their brother, as a hostage in Egypt until they return. When Jacob, their father, hears of this demand, he's devastated. ויאמר אליהם יעקב, אותי שיקלתם יוסף איננו ושמעון איננו ואת בנימין תיקחו. Jacob, their father, says to them, you have bereaved me of my children. Joseph is gone and Shimon is gone, and you would take Benjamin from me? It's hard to imagine what Jacob is feeling. After losing his beloved son years ago, he is faced with the possibility of losing another. We read in the last parasha how he reacted to the tragic news of Joseph's alleged death. ויקרא יעקב שמלותיו וישם שק במותניו ויתאבל על בנו ימים רבים. He tore his clothes and cried and mourned for many days. His sons and daughters tried to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. He said he wishes to die so he can once again be reunited with his beloved son Joseph. I know this behavior. I recognize these words. I've experienced it up close when I tried to comfort my parents and my siblings and my sister-in-law, who remained a widow. I see this grief when I look in the mirror, and I ask myself, how do we recover? How can we rise from this terrible disaster? How can we continue to function, to work, to raise my girls, to live a happy life when dealing with such sorrow? I don't have any answers. We see that even though many years have passed since he heard of Joseph's death, Jacob is still bitter and miserable. He's anxious and concerned for his children and the prospect of experiencing any more loss. Is this what the future entails for me and my family? For all those, so many of us, who lost their loved ones since October 7th? Is this what is destined for all the bereaved families? When I went back to Israel for Eli's funeral in the Shloshim, the entire country was dealing with grief. We were a Medina Shakula, a bereaved country. and I was surrounded by it. But since I returned here to Michigan, I saw to my astonishment that the sun rises every morning and sets every evening. Children go to school every day, including my girls. Businesses continue to work. Seasons continue to change. We celebrated Hanukkah, even though I feel like it's still Simchat Torah. Over 2 months passed since our national and personal disaster, and life goes on. Life has to go on. I can't describe how difficult it was for me to light the first candle of Hanukkah, a holiday that symbolizes joy, happiness, and hope, a light in the darkness, but I don't really feel happiness or joy or hope. How can I celebrate during this time? So to try to answer this question, I turn to the words of Rona Ramon, Zichron Livracha, who wrote, "We are always in the process of longing and always in the process of missing out. We must maintain a constant balance between what we don't have and what is still around. Choose to grow even from the darkness. Remember that the pain will never go away, and know that there is a way, even from a place of shortage, to live life to the fullest." Rona Ramon was the widow of Ilan Ramon, Zichrono Livracha, the first Israeli astronaut who perished in the Space Shuttle Columbia disaster, and the mother of Asaf Ramon, Zichrono Livracha, who was killed in a training accident in the Israeli Air Force. She experienced the loss of her husband and her son, but chose to dedicate her life to spreading light in their memory. She established the Ramon Foundation, which promotes academic excellence with Israeli children. She went on to live a life full of purpose, social activism, and doing good until she passed in December 2018, 7 years ago, after battling cancer. That was a month before my second daughter, Rona, was born. So this is how I hope to deal with this disaster. Not like Jacob, who spends his life mourning and crying his loss, paralyzed by his grief, but like Rona Ramon, who directed her sorrow to spread light and doing good in the world in the memory of the people she loved and lost, to find comfort in actions, to stay busy, to keep myself surrounded by people, to be strengthened by community. That is what I came here to do. And I'll let you know how that works for me. Shabbat Shalom, and thank you very much.